Protests continue across the nation and right here at home.
Tonight, activists from the American Civil Liberties Union are taking new steps to protect political protests happening right here in Metro Atlanta. We have Atlanta News First anchor Tori Cooper, who attended a legal observer training tonight at Ebenezer Baptist Church. So, Tori, what exactly did these participants walk away with tonight?
They walked away with more information on what they can and cannot do at protests and how they can protect their First Amendment rights. The American Civil Liberties Union wants students and political protesters to know what First Amendment rights they have before they step on a college campus or anywhere else.
One of the biggest things is to know whether it's public and private.
Fallon McClure of the ACLU says private universities can make their own policies around free speech, but public universities have more First Amendment protections. But there's a difference between what good trouble looks like.
If you're protesting on the sidewalk, or if you're posting something, on your social media or putting something out there on the internet in form of protest, the government has very, very, very limited actions that they can take to limit that speech.
In bad trouble.
First Amendment. It's not protected to get in front of a body of people and incite them to engage in immediate violence.
The ACLU also offered training on how to be a legal observer to help get more eyes and ears on the ground to protect protesters' free speech.
That's democracy. We're going to lose it if we don't do something.
Meredith Conyers has been a legal observer since 2016.
Well, what we do is we have a number that we call, and then that puts us in contact with the lawyers.
Taking notes and reporting on protests around them to ensure everyone's rights are protected. Students like David say knowledge like this is power in a protest.
College campuses, they've never drawn away from expressing free speech, so I just thought with that in mind, this knowledge would be great to have.
Now, if you're interested in becoming a legal observer, you can just head to our website at AtlantaNewsFirst.com. Reporting live in the Sweet Auburn neighborhood tonight, I'm Tori Cooper, Atlanta News First.